Let me show you what we got here. Exedy clutch Pro Kit, and I got this off of Rock Auto, believe it or not, for 90 bucks. 95, actually 95 bucks. Comes with everything you need to do this type of job for this particular car. I went ahead and got a rear main seal. That was extra. This is the clutch throwout bearing. Okay, this comes with the kit. Okay, so I got a rear main seal. That's automatic. I'm going to change. Here's the clutch disc. Okay, very high quality stuff from Exedy. Exedy is a #1 company. If you want to do any kind of Japanese car, I would stick with Exedy only. They make top quality clutches, and no, I don't get kickbacks or benefits from upping this brand. So, but this is just a top quality brand that is very popular for Japanese cars. Hang on a second. And here's the pressure plate for this particular car. Okay, so good stuff. And another thing that this comes with is a pilot bearing. I do believe the Protege has a pilot bearing, but those are the parts that are going to go in. So you got that, and you got the clutch disc itself here. All right, so there's your clutch kit, and as you can see, there's an assortment of parts lying here. These are the axles that you have to remove. Okay, that's the this item here is the left engine mount, engine/transmission mount. This is a rear bottom. This is the bottom brace that goes onto the bottom of the car. Okay, these are, and that's the center piece that goes along, that braces the center of the frame. These are just some plastics that kind of shroud the inner fenders. Air box, the intake tube, and of course the air silencer, front engine mount, the battery box bottom, and this is the bracket off of the intake manifold. Okay, so you got to remove those components to get that out of the way. And the only thing that's keeping this transmission in the car, you got to remove this too. This is your slave cylinder. Notice you just unbolt it. Unless you're going to be replacing this guy, do not open this line, because brake fluid is going to go everywhere. And usually bleeding these types of systems is a pain in the butt. So you got to do reverse bleed and all this. This is where the arm would push the clutch, and the slave cylinder would push this lever here, and it would release the clutch, so you can put it engage the car in gear. And this is the transmission. The only two bolts that are holding this is this bolt and this bolt, and those are going to be removed, and then I'm going to drop it out of the car. Alright, so once you got everything secured, and I've gotten the transmission secured to a jack here via this cable strap, and this is going to just basically hold the transmission steady to the jack here. And I suggest this is the only way that you do this. If you're doing this at home, it is possible to get the car out of the transmission out of the car without a jack such as this, or a setup like this. It's just going to be a lot harder, and you're going to basically be laying on your back. But if you have a shop or someplace that has a lift, it makes life a whole lot easier, or make this job rather a whole lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that bolt, and that should knock it out. There we go. As you can see, the engine and transmission is already separated without the need of applying any kind of pressure, such as with a pry bar or anything of that sort. But we're going to give it a little bit extra here. We're just going to gently separate the two, this union. but just very gently separate the two. Just rock them ever so slightly. Separate them, and once they separate completely, make sure you want to have two hands on the transmission. If you're utilizing a jack such as this, kind of brace it so when it comes down, it should come down nice and easy. And it's a little bit loose, so what we're going to do is just start lowering it down like so. And she just comes right out. Very easy. So now that we've got the transmission safely out of the car and onto the ground, you can see this is your clutch assembly and this is your pressure plate. You can see the disc behind here, and right behind this guy is your flywheel. Now this does not look as if it's, I don't want to say it's never been changed, but it does not look like it's been changed. This looks like a factory clutch. Now this car currently has around, I'd say about 160,000 miles on it, and I really don't see, I mean, I'm looking at the clutch disc, it doesn't look like it needs to be replaced. But again, yeah, I've got plenty of disc there. I'm actually doing this job for no reason. But like I said, I bought this car used. Actually, yeah, the flywheel looks brand new. Lucky me. But the rear main seal, I see some oil here, and I don't like that. So it's a possibility that maybe somebody did this in the past, put a new flywheel and a pressure plate, clutch and everything, and didn't replace the rear main seal. Alright, so in order to get the clutch out, what we're going to need to do is remove, looks like you have 6 bolts here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, 6 bolts all around. Those bolts hold this pressure plate to the flywheel, and they're all 14 millimeter, I believe. Yes, 14. And so basically, you're just gonna, if you can do this by hand, or if you have an air gun to help you out, you can. That'll help a lot, make a job a whole lot faster. So let's zip those out with a 3/8 air to it. I'm going to kind of make a triangle shape, relieve the pressure here, 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 and here. Alright, so here we go. That's 1. That's 2. And if you drop some washers, make sure you retrieve those. There are some washers behind it. That's number 3. That's number 4. That's 5. And the last one is 6. Yeah, it looks like the clutch has been done in this car, but you know, as I said, to make this car reliable, when I first got the car, I decided to just start replacing parts and doing maintenance items, you know, kind of doing some preventative maintenance, because I really didn't want the car to be breaking down on me and stuff. Oh yeah, that's a brand new flywheel. And this this clutch kit is brand new as well. And guess what? I don't know if you can see that right there, but that is the emblem for Daikin Exedy. So this is an Exedy brand clutch. I didn't really need to do it, but you know what? We're there. I already bought it, and I can't send it back. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. This is the pilot bearing. Now, I don't know, for whatever reason, this pilot bearing feels a little loose. So this flywheel looks almost brand new. It looks very new, but this pilot bearing does not feel new. So that's kind of strange. Didn't like the sound of that, but very fine thread bolts. And of course, they did the right thing when whoever put them in. They put thread lock on these, because I do think that the end of the crankshaft is hollow, and some of these crankshafts on the other end, it goes straight into the crankcase, and they put this thread lock on there. So good call on them. Okay. Okay, so she came loose nice and easy. Now, normally, before removing the flywheel, you always want to note the location of this little hole, okay? Because that's usually where everything lines up. But since it came loose nice and easy, you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, as you can see here, the rear main seal is nice and wet back there. So whoever did this job, they did not replace the rear main seal. So we're going to do that today. So to remove the seal, I got a seal puller. I think this one will work with it. And just kind of stick it in there and pull it out. Yeah, see, it came out so easy. Way too easy. A lot of oil in that area. Yeah. Alright, so now I'm going to put the seal in. Make sure that as I said before, make sure that ring is back there. And to put the seal, basically we're just gonna kind of go on one top on the side. You're gonna squeeze down a little. Use a small pick. Be careful not to puncture the seal, and just kind of go around in a fashion like that to get the seal all around. Okay, careful not to agitate it to the point to where you injure it or cause it to break. And you just want to slip that on there just like that. Okay, now to get the seal to pop inside, what I'd normally do, and you know, various automotive manufacturers like BMW, a lot of BMWs and Audis and the German makes, they actually have a seal installer. It's a big cup or you know, piece that sits over the seal where you can kind of lightly tap it in. In this case, Mazda Protege, I'm not aware of any tool that out there that you can use to drive in the seal. So what I do is I just lightly tap. Now this is like a mallet, and it has a rubber end and a plastic end. You can use either end. Sometimes I alternate, and you just kind of give it some light taps, driving it in nice and even all around. All right, nice and easy, nice and easy. All right. If this happens to you where you know your hammer gets a little close here and you can't drive it in any further, if you want to drive it back to the edge of the plate, what you want to do, you can get an extension or something like this, and just right at the edge, just lightly tap the seal into place like so. And you can you want to do this in uniform this way. You don't get any leaks later. And you can kind of angle the extension or whatever you're using to drive in the seal so it doesn't hit the edge. And you just want to give it some light taps. Okay, just like that. And then when you're done, take your finger and just run your finger along this edge. Okay, just like that. If you feel the edge of the seal raised up a little bit, if you feel the edge of the seal raised in that area, if it's uneven here, just take your, like for example, it's a little bit raised here, So just take your extension and just kind of tap it in some more. Make sure it's nice and even. You got a little bit of uneven area right here. Just like that. Alright. You want to get that uniform, you want the feel of the seal around the edge of this flange here to be uniform. So we got just a little bit of a raised area right here. Very little. And there you go. If it helps, I'm wearing gloves. If it helps, take your glove off because your finger's a lot more sensitive without the rubber on the outside of it. So there you go. You got a little bit of a raised area right there. Okay. A little more here. Okay. She looks like she's even. Just a few more areas. That's it. Alright, so this is the flywheel, okay? And this is the rear side of the flywheel. And what we're going to do here to change this bearing. You can see the bearing is kind of crunchy there. This is a new one. Alright. So in order to change that bearing, we got to drive that bearing out of this housing and we got to press in the new one, okay? Alright, so to drive the bearing out, I'm just going to use a spacer here. I'm just going to place the flat end of it here right over the bearing piece. And we're going to use a drive tool and just give it a couple of smacks. Hopefully the camera doesn't fall over. Okay, here we go. Okay. You can get the bearing out that way, or you can press it out in a press machine. When the flywheel sits, the bearing sits just like that. When the flywheel is on there, the bearing sits in this little groove. But it must be flush with the front face. At this time, normally what you would do with the flywheel, you want to check the surface area for any kind of scar marks or deep cuts or anything like that, because at that point it would need to be resurfaced. But this looks like a flywheel that's in pretty good shape, and so there is a way to measure that, but at this point I don't think it's needed. Alright, now we're ready to put the flywheel back into the car, and I'm going to put it in at exactly the same place I taken it out. And so you're actually going to use the bearing to kind of balance the center. Well, move this guy out of the way. That's the starter. Now I've already pre-soaked my bolts in thread lock. And you don't need a whole lot of that stuff. You just need a little. So when I say soak, I don't mean I gouged them or soaked them totally. As you can see, the bolt's nice and wet. You can see the redness on there. You don't need much of this stuff because if you do happen to have to go into this thing again, you want this to be serviceable. So that's one. We're just going to use that to locate it and keep it up there. Alright. And then we're going to place two more. And what you're going to do, you're going to torque these bolts down to about 70 to 75 foot-pounds of torque using a torque wrench. That's one. That's two. That's three. That's four. 5, 6. Okay, so one thing to note before you put in the clutch disc, pay very close attention to the way the clutch disc goes in. And you would do that when the clutch comes out of the car. But just in case, for whatever reason, you're absent-minded and you forget, always just look at the clutch and look at the instructions in the box. And actually, you can look here, and right here it says TM side. Now it says TM stands for transmission side. So this side of the clutch will be facing outward, the nose of the clutch. Okay, you're not gonna. I mean, you won't be able to put it back that way because it's not going to sit. So, but that's how that goes in there, just like that. Okay, take a look at these pins. Okay, you got 1, 2, and 3. Note that these 3 pins are right in the center of 2 bolts. So you have 2, 4, and 6. So before you put the disc and everything in, fit the pressure plate on just like that, and note the 3 pins will stick out. 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, and 6. Make sure that this area is clean of any kind of grease, dirt, and oil. Same thing here. Make sure there's no grease. See, I got a little bit of grease there. I got to wipe that off. You can see it's nice, clean surface, nice, clean mating surfaces. Put it in the splines. And you're going to try to work that alignment tool in that bearing. In the back, just like that. Okay, now once everything's seated nice and tight, make sure your pins are located, 1 and protruding, 1, 2, and 3, and then your 6 bolts, excuse me, 2, 4, and 6. Once that's all aligned and your clutch disc is, you're going to put that right in the center of that bearing. You can feel it in the bearing itself. It's in the center. Then you can take your bolts and start putting them in. Alright, so now I'm going to torque it down. What you're going to need here is, what is this, 14? And I'm going to do a nice crosshatch pattern as I did before with this bolts before. So you got 6 bolts, 2, 4, and 6. I'm going to kind of go direct across like that in that motion. So same thing. And we're going to be torquing to, and the specifications is 15 to 27 pounds. I'm just going to go with 20. It's an even number. So that's 1, 2, and then I'm going to go across. That's 3. That's 4, 5, and come straight across here for 6. And there you have it. And that completes the clutch installation. As you can see, everything is nice and uniform. The clutch disc is directly in the center. You can check always. You can just take your index finger and just kind of go around. If it's nice and free, uniform, freedom of movement at all around, it's pretty much centered, or at least close enough. But with the clutch disc tool going all the way through to the pilot bearing, you know it's centered directly, and it's nice and centered. You can move your finger, you can pull it out, and now you're ready to install the transmission. I took this the clutch arm off. I washed it down in Solvate, cleaned all the grease off, put fresh grease behind the pivot points here, here, and here, and also here. You can see a little red grease there. And we've installed the clutch release bearing, the new one, and this clutch release bearing just kind of slides on this shaft here. So it took just a thin, ever so thin film of grease, just a little bit, clean off this shaft here that it rides on, and put just a little bit of grease for lubrication. Okay, so freedom of movement. And then I took a little bit of grease here just to go around the splines a little bit to put everything, make sure everything fits nice and tight. And that's the last bit before installation of the transmission. Alright, so once you have the transmission secured to the jack, what we're going to do is start to raise the transmission to put it back in place. So I'm going to come up, it's going to be a minute before I get it up high enough so you can see what's going on. But if you are using a jack and you are raising the transmission in place, you may need, if you can't secure it and leave it on the jack itself, you may need assistance from a second person to help you lift the transmission into the car. Otherwise, you could hurt yourself. You could drop your transmission and break it if that happens, you're screwed. I don't want anyone to get screwed. So if you need help, and if there's someone like a friend, a brother, or a neighbor, someone you hang out with, don't be afraid to ask them, hey dude, come on over, help me with this little project that I got going. And because even though in the DIY world you try to do everything by yourself, or a lot of things, some things you just can't do by yourself, and there's no shame in it. Just ask for assistance and you can do the rest by yourself. All right, so what we're gonna do is try to work the transmission in a little closer. I gotta kind of rotate it that way and rotate the transmission backwards to align everything. There we go. You can really feel when the splines of the clutch and the splines of the input shaft and the clutch seat, the clutch disc seat, you can feel it kind of go in, and just like that. And now the dowel pins are kind of lining up the way I want them. Just need a little bit off here. Bring it down right about right there. You want to work it in as close as possible. Also, when you're putting in the transmission, you do want to make sure that there is nothing like any wires or anything. You want to make sure that there's no wires or anything between the bell housing of the transmission and the engine. That could really suck once you got everything back together and you found out that you have to pull it all apart again. To help slide things along and put bolts in and just kind of help close the transmission into place. I got two, by the way, there's about let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's about 5 of these big bolts. Once you get it this close, you can kind of turn the bolts to help pull the transmission in close enough so you can so it lines up by itself. And when you do this, you don't want to torque too much. You just want enough pressure to bring this back into one single union, and you're just going to do it like this. You're going to feel a little bit of pressure. That's because the dowel pins are being driven into place. But you just want to add just a little bit of pressure. You don't want to add too much. So you're going to come to the back. Okay. Once you get to the back, you add a bolt to the back. You're going to do the same thing. You guys can't see back here, but the same thing is happening. You'll know something's wrong immediately if the gap is closing and you have too much tension. If you have a whole lot of, if you're turning these bolts and the transmission is going this way, but you feel once you're torquing or once you're bringing it in like this, if it's not this easy, then something is wrong. The splines of the gearbox, the splines of the output shaft and the clutch are not aligned. And stop immediately, back it out, realign it, and try again. If it's this easy, then you know you got it right. The transmission is effectively back in the car. You haven't completed the job, but you have successfully changed the clutch, and you've got everything back together. You just got to put the bolts, the drive axles. You got to put all the bolts back in the bell housing, the drive axles, engine mounts, and all this assorted stuff here back into the car, and you are set.